Hello, welcome back. You are watching Real News Insight. I'm your host, Ina Makungu, head of news here at Royal 12:1 AM, he, him. And we're here to bring you the biggest news stories of the week and get Warwick students' opinions on them. In the headlines today, Boris Johnson is once again in self-isolation after being exposed to COVID. We're going to address what lockdown 2. We're going to address, obviously, the comings and goings at number 10 Downing Street. And also, we're going to discuss the all-student vote and everything that happened there. But first, I want to discuss a big story that sort of broke today. The new Leamington Mega Lab, which is going to bring 2,000 new jobs. A new Leamington lab for COVID testing is opening up here in Leamington. A new COVID testing lab is opening up here in Leamington Spa, which promises to bring 2,000 new jobs. It looks to be one of the biggest testing centres we have in the whole of the UK. And here's Warwick University's official statement. University of Warwick is geographically very close to the proposed location testing lab in Leamington. That was announced today. University asked if we can help with this initiative, and we offered our full support. So hopefully we're going to be getting testing under control very, very soon. Now, I want to introduce my panel. I've got a fantastic panel of guests here. I want to start with a long-term friend of the show, who hasn't been on in a very long time. Rin, welcome back to Insight.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, Rin, what have you been doing since we last saw you?
I can't remember when you last saw me, I'm not gonna lie, but I can't have been doing much because, lockdown, so...
Well, Rin, I know for a fact that's not true, because I know, Rin, you've been hard at work of running a helping run a radio station. Because we're back, we're officially back on air, back as a radio station. What's the new schedule looking like, Rin? Walk us through some of your favorite shows and new schedule.
You know what? The schedule is really, really great. I really urge people to go and have a listen at some point. I think today's shows are actually quite good. Like, there's a show called Stuck in the Midlands with You. That's 3 till 5. That's a great show. Of course, there's my show as well from 5 p.m. But yeah, no, there's some really great shows on the schedule, and I'm so glad that we can actually put them on air and not on Mixcloud. That is it feels like a personal achievement for me to have a schedule that's actually on air. But it's really the tech team's hard work that's reflected here.
Of course, you're listening to watching the best Raw show, Insight, right now, bringing you all the biggest news stories in commentary. The schedule rules. Yes, thank you, Jacob.
The schedule rules.
Now we're going from someone who's been on Insight far too many times to someone who's actually brand new to the show. Andrew, welcome to the stream.
Hello. My name's Andrew. I'm a second year at Warwick. Never been on the show before, but I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Andrew, to discuss your student vote. Now, Andrew, I want to ask, you invited me many months ago to something called Warwick Math Lab. What is Warwick Math Lab?
So I'm the MATLAB student ambassador for the University of Warwick. That probably doesn't mean anything to people who don't do like maths or engineering. It's basically a software that like a lot of engineering people use. And I run events to like help people learn it and stuff. I actually ran an event last Monday with Warwick AI, which was quite good.
Well, hopefully, Andrew, some more people join it very, very soon. And our last guest for today's show, Charlie Humphreys, President of Comedy Society, Head of Arts. Charlie, I have to ask, where do you find the time?
The answer there is that I don't have the time. I'm currently drowning in work, as usual. And also, Comedy Society is quite small, so I don't invest any time in it.
Oh well, I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear that. A lot of laughing from someone who's invested a lot of time in Comedy Society. All right, let's move on to our first story today. This is the big one for Warwick students. The all-student vote results came in after a week of heavy campaigning. We finally know what won and what lost, and I will now summarize that for you. So, boycott, divestment, and sanctions motion, which would ask the university to divest, break links, and pledge to be apartheid-free. It received in total 4,413 votes, with 1,917 against and 1,665 for, and was therefore not carried. Remove Barclays from campus and invest in ethical banking, received in total 180 votes. It received 2,020 votes against. Yay, brilliant! 2020. What a great number. And 1,509 votes for, and therefore was not carried. Warwick SCU supports UCU's call for online teaching. Now, this was the big one, the one everyone was interested in. It received in total 6,032 votes, with 4,344 votes against, and 1,481 votes for, and was therefore not carried. Only one motion was carried, the final one: Warwick University to fully divest from all unethical industries and release all investments. Total votes 3,378, with 1,713 for and 1,143 against, and was therefore carried. And this one was the biggest student union votes ever, with 6,000. I've said 1,000 so many times. It doesn't sound like English to me anymore. It's just what John King felt like on election night. It was good breaking all those precincts. Like, if you go here in Florida, like, no, this is nonsense. I don't know why I'm saying. You're getting a lot of numbers today, folks. I'm sorry. We'll get on to something interesting in a second. With 6,424 individual voters and 21,405 individual votes cast for various motions. Now, Andrew, I know you came, and obviously it's not the big one, but I know you came on to discuss one motion in particular. Would you like to walk us, remove Barclays from campus and invest in ethical banking? Now, you messaged me last week, and you seemed to have a very strong stance against. Why are you so against this motion?
I think it's sort of to do with, I think just university students, they have this idea that a bank can be ethical in the first place. And I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I think by the very virtue of being a bank, for the most part, they're going to eventually take part in some pretty unethical practices. You look at stuff like HSBC, you look at stuff like Deutsche, they have been caught for money laundering. They have been caught for doing like really messed up things and, destroying a lot of communities, destroying a lot of people's lives. And I think recently even HSBC almost had their license to even be a bank in the first place. They almost had that license revoked. But the thing is, they're offering the good interest rates. It's not like one of those small banks or smaller building societies or credit unions where, it's probably more ethical on some level, but you're not getting as much back in return. And I think this whole notion that they can just get rid of Barclays and just some ethical bank is just going to swoop in and solve all of their problems. I just think, I don't even know why it came to be a motion, to be honest. And if it did pass, I would have been very, very interested to see sort of what they put to replace it. And it's also because these banks, they're investing your money. Say they're investing into like an index fund. There's hundreds, thousands of companies. Is someone going to sit there and individually check that each one of these companies that makes up the index fund is ethical? Is someone actually going to put in the time to sort of go, yeah, you know what, this company's not ethical, we're not going to invest in any of the fund? It's such a, I don't want to say naive, but it is quite a uninterpreted view of what's going on. And I think people who've looked into like investment banking division and those kinds of big companies, shady stuff goes on, they get fined, people go to prison, but they just continue. And I don't think there's such a thing as an ethical bank, and especially not one that would be big enough to take the needs and like be able to sort of service the students of Warwick to replace Barclays.
I mean, I want to put this to have a question to everyone here. Many of the things Andrew said there against the motion would actually be used by people arguing for the motion in very similar terms. Banks like HSBC and Barclays, I mean, as I've said, HSBC almost lost its license to be a bank. They conduct massively unethical. Surely it's better as a student union to put our finances in something more ethical. Really, I want to come to you.
I think it's really weird the way they phrase this motion, because I opened to actually see what part of ethics they're referring to, and it was something really odd about climate change in the actual motion thing, and I was just really confused by it. I'm not gonna lie. I think Andrew knows way more about this than I do, but I think everything he said is right, and I think it all comes down to the fact that, you do you do need some sort of a bank on campus, you know, especially because I think Santander closed as well. And I'm not like, I just don't see how this is something that will be dealt with. Like removing Barclays from campus, and what are you going to replace it with that's more ethical, especially on the notes that they've put here. They were about the university pledging to become carbon neutral by 2030, and then you know, the climate emergency being declared by University of Warwick as well as student union and, you know, scientists around the world. And it's like, yeah, but it was just phrased so badly. And I think this is the case for most of these motions. And I don't even know, when people vote for them, I highly doubt that a lot of people actually look at the motions. So I don't even, like, I just find it a bit baffling when they put these titles on the motions and no one actually reads what the motion is, so they just vote. It just confuses me a little bit. But I agree with Andrew. It's a bit like, you're going to remove Barclay and you're going to replace it with what?
Well, I again, people advocating for the motion would say we need to invest in ethical industries no matter what. So building societies, you're talking about climate change there, need to invest in green energies rather than oil. Do you agree with Andrew? Or do you think the motion was confusing and a waste of time?
It was a very confusing motion. I wasn't entirely sure what I was reading because they seemed to segue from like, Barclays is evil, the climate is bad, let's do something about this and get rid of it. Like, I just didn't understand it. And I think I voted against this motion mainly because I'm very self-interested and have Barclays as my own bank. And I think that is what it comes down to. Most students who aren't informed on this, I certainly wasn't informed on this, I voted very much on Barclays as my bank. I want it to stay because it's convenient. It's not, they should be more clear about it. The student union should have more conversation about these things and make their position and their reasoning clear before they put it to a vote for the whole student body to vote against, because otherwise it's going to have either the right result isn't going to pass or just no one's going to vote on it and it's just irrelevant.
Yeah. Charlie, I wanted to hold that thought because we will get back to discussing the theme of misinformation and people not knowing what they're voting on in just a second. Before that, I want to discuss, I guess let's talk about the big motion that was debated in this election, the move for all online teaching. Now, as we saw earlier in the term, the SU was initially campaigned with all term one teaching to be online. That campaign sort of very quietly not stopped, but sort of went underground in preparation for this all-student vote, when hopefully they will get a mandate to carry out this campaign. Now, as we've seen, that did not happen. Rin, Andrew, Charlie, I want to ask, what are your thoughts about online teaching? Is it safe to be in person? Andrew, I'll come to you.
So there's very good arguments for, there's very good arguments against. And if you've been following Warwick Sessions for the past sort of few weeks, just the stuff that people are saying, I think is ridiculous. It's not as simple as, you know what, let's just chuck everyone into a room with like masks and 2 meters apart and it will be fine. Like, yeah, some people aren't going to want to come into campus. They're going to want to have the option of doing stuff online. Some people are going to be thinking, you know, I'm paying a lot of money to be here. I should be able to go into campus. I should be able to actually talk to someone in person. But people just have this really idealistic view that such a simple thing as moving all teaching online or doing it blended is just going to solve everything. And I think it's quite indicative of how people are as students, because they think, oh, if I vote for something and I tell my friends I voted, I've done my part. Like, I can go and brag about it on social media, how I'm saving people from dying or something. And, you know, I'm doing my bit to fight COVID. It's ridiculous. You know, people are going to want to come to uni and do their thing. They're not particularly, they are self-interested, and it's not a bad thing to be self-interested because you're the one who's paying the money. You're the one who's getting this degree. You're the one who's putting in the hours to study. It is down to you. But I think as students, it's out of our hands, and it doesn't really matter what the vote comes out to be. They'll say it's either too unsafe, or there'll be some other consideration. They'll say, you know, it's a pandemic. We can't do what the students want because it's not in the students' best interest.
Charlie, I want to come to you. You're a life sciences student, I believe.
I am indeed.
Yeah, obviously, let's ask about the science then. The science of in-person learning. Is it safe?
My department have loved shoving this information down my throat, and I believe, from what I've experienced in my department for going in-person teaching, that it is arguably safer sometimes than even going to Aldi. I'm in my seminars, in my tutorials, I am in different corners of a whole lecture theatre wearing a mask, and there's no contact between anyone. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. I feel like the in-person precautions that the university and most departments have made are sufficient in order to reduce the transmission. Like, there are several studies that even say just both participants in an interaction wearing a mask and being 2 meters apart, the risk of transmission of coronavirus is almost zero. So yes, I think, especially the detriment of online learning. They spent 2 years, well, they spent my whole degree going, you can't learn online, you've got to come into lectures because it's a poorer quality. And I'm glad that they do have some in-person things, because I do feel like I'm getting a better quality of learning because I don't study well at home. And in terms of safety, yes, I think it's quite safe, even more safe than like being on the piazza, even though that's outside.
And I want to come to you. Is in-person teaching safe?
I think I'm in a really odd position where I haven't really experienced that much of, socially distanced in-person teaching. So this is completely based on basically my tutorials, because that's the only in-person teaching I have, because with my wonderful luck, I would normally have labs, but I got one experiment and it was entirely online. But I feel like what Charlie was saying is true. I do feel genuinely like it feels safer than literally going to Aldi or to Tesco or whatever. So I do feel like the way that this online teaching has been done is safe. But at the end of the day, what I think should happen, because I've heard a lot of people that they're worried about their health, and they're worried about their family's health, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. But I feel like it is really difficult for people that don't want to be in person to go completely online. And I think I've heard that this is something that's been really difficult for people to do, and they've had to go through multiple levels of sort of, I guess, in a way, just admin stuff to go through it, and it's been really difficult. And I think the university should put more of an emphasis on how can we make it easy for people who don't feel safe to go online and to feel safer that way.
Yeah. Well, one big group of people who don't feel safe with in-person teaching is, of course, the UCU, and teachers in general. They are heavily advocating for online teaching. In fact, they're saying that if in January we're still in person, they may go on strike. Do we think it's fair to put teachers who don't feel safe in situations? Andrew, I'll come to you.
So you mean, just to clarify, so in January the UC wants to put everything online, and you think that it's not for the teachers to decide? Sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the question.
Okay, basically I'm asking, do you think it's fair for students to reject a campaign? Do you think it's fair for students to force teachers who don't feel comfortable coming in person to come in person?
I think it's out of the students' hands, and the students sort of coming together and saying, we demand in-person teaching. Yeah, it's definitely not fair onto the lecturers, teachers, assistants, supervisors, technicians. But I feel that'll be an issue handled by their union, by the UCU. And I don't know, I can understand people's frustration, because, you stayed inside for months. You finally come to university, you're like, you know what, clubs are shut, but at least I can come and see my friends on campus. And then they're kind of trying to take that away from you. And it's just a really bad situation. It's like being between a rock and a hard place that, yeah, they're going to want to have in-person stuff, like quite a lot of people, but it's just not plausible. If someone deems it too dangerous, it's just going to be taken away. They have the power to do this, and I don't think the students, it's not that we're necessarily powerless. It's, people couldn't defer a year because of COVID. It wasn't meant to be a good enough reason for the university for you to just say, can I come back in a year after this is all over? So I think you just have to sort of grit your teeth and get through it, no matter what happens, because in my opinion, a better solution to this.
Yeah. Now I realize you're STEM weirdos. Obviously, you've not really experienced strikes. So I was going to ask a question about strikes, and again, it's like none of you know what that means. None of you have people. None of you have any worker solidarity in your department. So of course you don't.
I had someone strike last year.
I
Doesn't
didn't.
count. You
That
had
was
one
great.
person. It doesn't count.
Just trying to
It
get
was
in on the
it
fun.
was the biggest module. It was the biggest module of like
Rin,
term 2.
I'm not gonna pretend I'm acquiescing to your pretend striker. Okay, it doesn't count.
That's so
To be
rude.
fair, I wish my department striked. It was like
Yeah,
a free
same.
holiday.
No, not for that reason.
Group reading week.
I really want a reading week.
You should have better degree. That's not really my problem. So yeah, so obviously none of you know what strikes are like. So obviously I can't ask a question about that because I want to ask them. Andrew, you mentioned Facebook. Charlie, you mentioned that. Charlie and Rin, you both mentioned not knowing a lot. This campaign, people have accused a lot of people campaigning in this campaign of. I said, oh god, now I've said the word campaigning too much. Throughout this campaign, lots of people have been accused of spreading misinformation about various motions, from BDS to all online teaching. Andrew, you are a frontline fighter in the Facebook wars. I want to come to you. Do you think you've seen a lot of misinformation flying around?
So I think it started popping up a few days ago. I like to go on Facebook, just have a bit of fun. I don't try and make those serious political posts as some of my friends have now started doing, which, whatever, that's like on them. I saw, a few days ago, there were even sponsored posts. People had actually paid for Facebook credit to get ads to sponsor like this motion. And the problem with it is, I think if both sides weren't as polarized, if one side tried being neutral and saying, you know what, here's the neutral standpoint of the BDS motion, for example, the other side would just go, you know what, you're being neutral, we actually care, and they would take it to like another extreme, and they would have a better chance of winning. So I completely understand why there were like loads of Facebook posts in the Facebook groups. There were the sponsored ads, people being like genuinely angry, just attacking each other for no reason. Because if someone had tried to take, not the moral high ground, I don't want to use that phrase, but just try to say, this is just what's going on, make your own decisions, it wouldn't have been as successful. And there's issues on both sides, I guess. I think the motion was actually condemned as being anti-Semitic in quite a few European countries. And then there's obviously people who are going, that's silencing the voice of people who are suffering because they're not allowed to sort of express their opinions of it. And it was just such a mess. And even another person, I think, someone in the SU called for a motion to put teaching online. And then people were like trying to get her to resign and like just saying really horrible things. This is like a person, this is someone who's just trying to do a job, and to sort of take out your own anger at the situation on someone who's literally just putting forward emotion. I mean, there's people I saw who, it was just disappointing to see, to be honest. Like, it doesn't add anything constructive. It doesn't make anyone feel better. It doesn't do anything to alleviate the situation. It's just like baseless anger.
Yeah. And now, obviously, Rin, Charlie, I don't know if you're into student politics, and many people are, but do you feel like you saw an upsurge in both anger and misinformation over the campaign period? Rin, I'll come to you first.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I did, and the fact that I noticed it is incredible because I was so busy over the last 2 weeks with mainly raw stuff. So I literally, the fact that I saw it is really astonishing. So it must have been a lot. And I feel like, again, it's people are getting so, in a way, defensive, and this argument is getting so heated. And I feel like while everyone is talking, they're not really talking to understand each other, if that makes sense. It was really unclear to me what was going on, I'm not gonna lie. So when the vote finally opened, I sat down and I actually decided to read what this motion was. And again, I think it was still unclear, even the way it was written. I don't know what it is about these motions. I'm not saying they shouldn't put them forward. I feel like what Andrew was saying about people going after sort of the SU officers who are putting these things forward. That's completely unfair. But I mean, I'm just half of these motions that are put forward. You have to really like get into it to actually understand what was going on, and especially when you have with the. I think the main reason for like the big turnout was obviously the online teaching stuff. But when you have this turnout, you're going to have more people that will actually look at the other motions as well. Clearly, they didn't have as many votes, but people would look at them as well. And if they don't understand what they're voting for, then it's just a bit of a, like, I don't want to say it's a waste of time, but if people don't know what they're voting for and what's going on, it's a bit pointless.
Yeah, now, Charlie, I want to come to you. Did you see this big upswell in fake news, misinformation, and frankly, it has to be said, harassment that took place over the past week?
Yeah, I definitely did. I ended up unfollowing Warwick Fashions for a while because that's like the main battleground, I guess, on Facebook. But it seems like that's a cyclical nature. Like every term or so, there is a toxic thing, and this term it just happened to be in-person teaching. Like in term 3, it was about the safety net. In term 2, there was something else that's irrelevant. And I feel like it's not a reflection on like the notion of online teaching. It's a reflection of the students who end up taking some things that are ultimately kind of sensible and pragmatic or just pointless and then take them too far and too much to heart. And yeah, in terms of online teaching and the vote, that came really... It came in the middle when everything was getting like really too much and too toxic online. So of course I had the big turnouts. And of course it's very divisive, but still people believed what they read on Warwick Fashions, which isn't the most reputable source. And yeah, if people don't, I agree with the Rin, if people don't understand what they're voting for, then it's pointless. People need to like make up their own minds and what they want instead of just seeing a sponsored post and like believing everything they see on Facebook. Especially when it comes to students who take things too seriously.
Yeah, you want to jump back in here on the Warwick Fashions debate. What's everyone say about Warwick Fashions?
Warwick Fashions, I'm sorry, listen, Warwick Fashions is great for all of this, like, oh, I have a crush on this person, like, in their initials. I love Warwick Fashions for that, but it is not. I think when people start having the big debates on there, I think it's a bit ridiculous, because if you want to have a debate with someone, you know, just don't do it anonymously, first of all. Come on, if you have something to say, you can own up to it, at least. And I find it bizarre when people start having, like, I think this is a whole Facebook thing. Warwick Fashions, obviously, is just a highlight of that one. But when people start having these big political discussions in the comments, like, that's fine. But you can also just, like, talk to each other, because I think what happens is, again, we just go to these extremes. All the time about on Facebook and especially on Warwick Fashions. It's not as Charlie said, a reputable news source. And I think to battle all of these problems that we've kind of mentioned, I think that SU I just saw that banner. Okay, that is great. But sorry, I just wanted to say the SU, like, to battle all of this sort of misinformation, I think they just need to be more clear on the motions they're putting forward.
Yeah. Andrew, I want to jump back to you. One last thing on this before we head to our final question on this topic.
So I'll try and keep it short. I think there seems to be a philosophy that's kind of prevalent now. Sort of, I remember when I first got Facebook in 2011, and people just posted memes on it, rage comics, like just dumb stuff. And now these social media platforms, people have realized how connected they can be and how they've just become so politicized, in my opinion. Like, you look at Instagram, you know, you're having people who've just come to uni, they go on Instagram, they look at some politics page where in a few sentences it's going to teach them like about these really complex issues. And yet these are good because they help break down like these concepts and, you know, give information to people. But I think you now have a trend where people they read something on Twitter or Instagram, like one of those short posts, and it's like, oh, you know what? I've educated myself. I can now go onto Facebook. I can now go onto, I don't know, just a conversation with my friends and say, you know what? I've read like a few paragraphs, like one of those slideshows on Instagram. You should now go educate yourself and like do the same. And it's just ridiculous. People have this false sense of superiority, I guess. You've not read that much into it. You know, these are really, really complicated issues. And some Instagram slideshow isn't going to tell you the difference between right or wrong between them.
Yeah. Now I want to go. I want to go to our final question for today. This was by far one of the biggest ASVs we've seen, and often student politics can seem very small and insular and dislocated from people's lives. But finally, Warwick University seemed to find something that actually tapped into people's imagination, got them to vote. Do we think we're going to see a big upsurge of people getting involved in student politics after they've been awakened by this ASV? Rin immediately made a face, so we're going to go straight to Rin.
No, they're not. I mean, this was all because it got blown up on social media. I don't think they're going to get more involved now. I think this is going to blow over. Like, I don't really have much to say on that. I just don't think that people are suddenly going to start caring. Maybe a few more people. It's gonna really not be some big, really significant number. A few more people might start caring, but I don't see it bringing loads of people to student politics all of a sudden. I really don't.
That's sad. Andrew.
I think there's just a very inherent problem with getting people to vote because most people just don't care. I know in my first year, you know, you're more focused on going clubbing and like making it to your lectures on time than sort of stuff that goes on within the SU. And I think with this year came the opportunity that if everyone's staying inside, they're obviously going to be online a lot more. They're going to be interacting with this stuff a lot more. And I would hope it means more people get involved. But I think there needs to be a sort of system in place where not that students are sort of coaxed into voting, but where the SU goes, you know, you're paying your money, you're putting your time into getting this degree. Just vote, at least abstain, just have your voice be heard, rather than let people who are just more vocal in the community decide what happens, like on behalf of the whole university.
Yeah. And last but never least, Charlie.
Yeah, no one's gonna care. Like, genuinely, I think the most I cared about student politics was this vote, and then at the beginning of first year when the president of the SU then, Liam Jackson, had like a little speech about, you know, you should really make your voice heard, and then I was like, no. Like, everyone I talk to who, as a student, never knows what the SU is doing, except they only know the SU is doing everything badly. Which, to be fair to them, is kind of true. But yeah, there's not really much that students can do, even if they do vote, because the SU is just like that faulty. So why bother trying to change something that's not gonna, you know, really improve until the end of my degree? Why?
Well, isn't that an inspiring rhetoric from our panel here today? Well, Andrew, thank you so much for coming. It's absolutely great having you here to discuss this. That was just a summary of all the all-student vote results. The BDS, all online teaching in Barclays failed, but disinvestment in ethical industries, that did in fact pass. And also, if you listen to the podcast on the radio and you missed my great banner, what I wrote was "All's fair in Warwick, love and war." My great achievement in the news, and nothing else to top it. Andrew, thanks for coming on today.
You should be president of Comedy
I'll stay on
Society,
for a little
Enoch.
bit.
All right, great. I'm just going to stick around. Well then,
too good to miss.
Yeah. A little silence here for the radio edit. In our next story today, we have Cummings and Goings. Dominic Cummings is out as the number one man at number 10 at Downing Street. We have Boris Johnson's finally back as Prime Minister. That was a little joke. That's not a political statement. It was a little joke. Can I ask something very quickly from the panel? Because my main observation story before I go into this minute, it's very opaque and weird and hard to follow. Rin and Charlie, Andrew, obviously you're not very. Would you describe yourselves as overly political people, like people really focus on politics? Just say yes
I
or
read
no.
the news.
Yeah,
That's
I read
it.
I read the news. Usually when there's something more entertaining involved, say like the US election, I will pay more.
And yet you couldn't come on our live stream. Yeah.
I did.
Anyway. So you wouldn't. So, what do you know exactly about the Dominic Cummings story? What do you know about what's going on right now? Before I start, I don't want to mansplain to anyone.
I didn't
Um,
think we were gonna be quizzed.
Oh yeah, and Andrew, it's a news show. What did you think was going to happen, Andrew? Please jump on.
I think it's worth keeping in mind because I'm sure people probably initially heard of him when he drove to Durham or whatever during lockdown. And I think it was completely blown out of the water, like him getting into a car, with his family. And if they stay in the car, like, of course, there's not a tangible risk of infecting anyone else, but that was completely beyond the point. This is supposed to be the face of, upholding standards, making sure everyone's following the rules. And it was just so I don't know why he did it personally. Like, you are the top dog. People are looking, they're scrutinizing every move you make. They're being forced to stay at home, quite partially to do with you. And then he just goes off like on a little car journey. It's like beyond belief in a way. He should have just laid low, stayed inside, watched some Netflix with his family or something, because it was just a move like beyond, I don't know, beyond comprehension to me.
Yeah, well, that is, I guess, that is sort of the dominant image of Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings was the big head of Vote Leave that won the Brexit referendum back in the day. He's on the senior advisor, or he was on the senior advisor of Boris Johnson's government. He became semi-famous over. So he's always sort of semi-famous before being the big manager who orchestrated the proroguing of Parliament and eviction of several Tory MPs, and then won through about 2019 election for Boris. And over the summer, he became famous again. For his trip to Durham and his eye test at Burnley Castle. And Dominic Cummings is in the news again because he has resigned as Boris Johnson's chief advisor. Now, the story in full is sort of, even I've not fully got my head around what happened, but if I can attempt to explain it to you, Boris Johnson wants to hire a new someone to run his press conferences for him, which upset one of Dominic Cummings' key aides, Lee Kane. In an attempt to placate Lee Kane, Boris Johnson wants to promote him to chief of staff. However, because Dominic Cummings and Lee Kane not widely liked in Number 10 and in the Number 10 office and in Parliament, this was very heavily fought against. So instead, Lee Kane resigned, and in solidarity, Dominic Cummings has now resigned with him. There's also a side issue of whether or not the Prime Minister's fiance helped force him out, and there's been backwards and forwards in the media as her allies and Dominic Cummings' allies brief against each other, which we will hopefully get into if we have the time. Firstly, I want to come to noted Dominic Cummings fan, Rin Datchura. Rin, what do you think about this whole saga?
I hate that you always point these at me like that. See, I'm really sad. Clearly, my favorite person in politics has left. That's why I can't stop smiling.
And that's going to be the show clip. I hope you understand. That's all
I know. I'm now a Trump supporter and a Dominic Cummings supporter. Yay, great for me. No, I'm so happy. You don't understand. I'm so relieved. But what you're saying, I'm so confused. He's now doing things out of solidarity. I'm sorry, what? No, this was not the motive. I am 100% certain of that, because I feel like I've spoken like on every news show about Dominic Cummings. I've said this, but he actually came to my school and he spoke about things, and I'm going to be really brief on this time, I promise. But he said his whole talk, he deliberately strayed away from politics, and that was the Q&A session. But he told us all about how to be successful, or his version of success, and his version of success was essentially, you do it for yourself, no matter the consequences to anyone else. Do not care. Stop it. This is the best thing that has happened to me, clearly. And he Yeah, and he gave us this whole plan about basically everyone's out to get you and you should only care about yourself, and now he's quitting out of solidarity? No, I don't buy it. But I am very glad that he's gone. And he managed to make his meme impact, which is something I truly admire. You know, the trip to Durham was definitely something great to entertain during lockdown.
Quick question, but I don't buy it. What do you mean?
Huh? I don't buy it.
What
I
do you
don't
mean
think
by
he quit. I don't think he quit out of solidarity. I think he was probably pushed out.
Well,
Yeah.
that brings us on to something that I would say we're discussing a bit, but we are really running out of time, so we might just have to power through this story, which is bizarre that I spent like half an hour talking about, like, over half an hour talking about the results of an all-student vote, and I had to push Dominic Cummings like 5 minutes at the end of the show. But this is the nature of what we do here now. The big problem with Dominic Cummings, this story has largely been fought from media briefings by unnamed sources who were probably Cummings and Lee himself. One of the big issues Dominic Cummings was facing in the office was that Boris Johnson blamed him and Lee Kane for the leakage of the story that Boris was going to put us back into a second national lockdown a few weeks ago. When we look at Number 10's relationship with the media, do we think it's a good thing that it seems to be largely based on constant leaks rather than actual public questioning and that kind of thing? Ray and I, you've already talked for like 5 minutes about Dominic Cummings, so I want to come to you, Andrew. What do you think?
So this whole notion that our news is coming from leaks, being drip fed, essentially, it shouldn't be like this. But at this point, I think just who cares because if they give any official statements, people will just not believe them. I think, obviously, when I think it was last December or something, when Labour lost like a lot of seats, and then people were like, "Oh yeah, let's get Brexit done with the Conservatives," and now, because of the way that COVID's been handled, both parties have been completely disillusioned. I think by Number 10, people are looking for alternatives now, and just the lack of communication. I don't think people are surprised by it anymore. Like, it's obviously a really terrible thing that you have to find this out through leaks, but at this point, there's like nothing else to do, I guess. We're just stuck in this weird limbo where, this is what's happening. Good luck changing it, basically.
Yeah. Now, a big element of this story has been. This is hard to explain. There's a misogyny aspect to this whole affair. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, one of the people accused of having pushed out Dominic Cummings is Boris Johnson's fiancée, Carrie Simons. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm bad with saying words. Carrie Simons. She's now been briefed against in the press by people who are allies of Dominic Cummings, and there's been an accusation that she's a wealthy Southern woman pushing out working class lads from the North in reference to Lee Kane, and they started calling her things like Princess Nuts. And there's been sort of an indication running through. Much of the coverage of this event has been fairly summed up as Boris Johnson's whipped by his girlfriend, and that's why he fired Dominic Cummings. Do we think? I was going to say one of our national media has a problem with misogyny, but I feel like that's just a yes. So. Do we? I'm so tired. I'm so tired. I'm sick of doing this job. Every week I come and cover these idiots being stupid. Charlie, I want to come to you as a woman in power. Do you think there's an issue with misogyny in the way this coverage has been going forward?
I personally think that yes. Well, to be fair, as a Northerner, firstly, I'd like to disown Dominic Cummings on the behalf of County Durham. But secondly, they're just grabbing at straws. They know that they are absolute. I really want to say a bad word, but I can't. But they're absolute idiots. And when a woman decides to call them out, it's not because she's a woman of power. It's because of a moral compass. I'm actually just outraged by this. I can't believe they're going to such a dated argument as to why they are in the right and why a woman is wrong. And it's just pushing out these working class Northern lads. No, they're just complaining. Stop being children. I'm actually quite outraged about this now. I didn't realise how, like, as a woman in power, no, it's because if I was Carrie Simmons, it'd be like, no, it's because I'm responsible and right. It's not because I'm a woman. It's because you're idiots. Wow.
I need to speed through the story now because I'm really losing it. Now that Dominic Cummings is gone, many people are saying this is a new era of Boris Johnson. We're going to see a new direction, less aggro, less fighting everyone, more in line with his more consensual politics of his initial mayorship of London. That was all supposed to happen today, but of course Boris Johnson is currently self-isolating because he once again came in contact with someone with COVID-19. What does the panel? This is last question of the day because we're going to start wrapping up now. What does the panel think new look Boris Johnson is going to look like? We'll go Rin, Andrew, Charlie.
I think it's going to be more chaotic than ever. I think Dominic Cummings, I don't like him at all in any case, but I think at least he had like some coherent thought. I think he's an intelligent person, so he kind of had a plan and a idea of what was going on in his surroundings, and I don't ever feel Washington has that. So I think we're gonna see even more chaos.
And Andrew?
I'm gonna be straight up. I think we got to strap ourselves in for a long one, boys. Like, I don't even. Who knows at this point? Like, they can just put out anything they want, and people will be like, you know what? Like, fair play, mate. Just right. I'll just be quick because I'm aware of time. I live in a village. Before the pub shut, you go into the pub. People have a lot of opinions. Everyone claims they could run the country if they wanted to. Like, at this point, it's just. I think people have just had enough that whatever happens, as long as it's not directly degrading their quality of life, they're just going to go with it because people now need to focus their energy on just getting through lockdown rather than making like political change.
Yeah. And Charlie, I'll come to you. What is new look Boris going to be?
I think there's going to be a lot more chaos. There'll be a lot more, I think, external fighting. Dominic Cummings is still a very influential sort of character and very manipulative, very sneaky. I think there's going to be a lot more like public, like in the press, sort of connivery and just misinformation spreading. So it's going to be difficult for Boris Johnson to try and keep control of that, but also just difficult for Boris Johnson without his main person to navigate a country as well, air quotes, strong air quotes, as he did. So it's all downhill from here.
Yeah, well, I mean, as Charlie said there, Dominic Cummings is not done. As mentioned in some of the initial Sunday Times reports about this, we do expect a blog coming very soon about his time in number 10. And also, Dominic Cummings, apparently famously towards the end, would do this thing where he would unpin a fake grenade and toss it into a room as he was leaving, as sort of a symbol of his future victory. That wasn't fully relevant for you to know, and I know we're running very short time, but I would have felt like I hadn't done my job as head of news if you didn't know it. So now that's on the record. Thank you to Rin, Andrew, and Charlie for coming on today. You've an absolutely wonderful, wonderful panel. Thank you to everyone at home who's watched or is listening to this as a podcast or as a radio show. Insight will be back next week at 1 p.m. But something I wanted to offer to mention to people right before we do is, if you want to come on the show, please do join the Raw News group. The link is in the description. Or if you want to help out running the news department and alleviating me from the endless suffering that is covering the news, sign up to become a news deputy. We have tons of great jobs you can do to get more involved with Raw. It's really a great society. But this is me signing off until next week. It's absolutely wonderful being here with you. Hopefully there'll be better news